the case of Alicia Canales Maguire. Alicia Canales Maguire was born on October 29, 1992 in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Growing up on a farm, she learned the value of hard work and often returned to her family's farm to help. Spending time with loved ones is essential to Alicia. She talks to them often. Alicia lives in Birdsview with her husband, Bradley, whom she married in a beach ceremony at Deception Pass in July 2017. She had just gotten married 2 months ago, and Alicia was excited about having her own family. Her sister, Amanda Canales, who has 3 children, was about to go on a business trip to New York and asked Alicia to babysit while she was away. Alicia happily agreed because she loved her nieces and nephews. Alicia had been taking care of her grandchildren with an in-house nanny. When the nanny heard the gunshots, she rushed to check. She found Alicia dead at the door. The nanny immediately called 911, asking for help. When the police arrived, they began searching the house to make sure the perpetrator was no longer inside. The police verified that only the nanny and Amanda's children were present. After the children were safely removed from the house, the police began collecting evidence. A car was parked in front of the house near where Alicia was shot, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had been next to the car, near the front door. Several bullets were lodged in the door frame, and Alicia's body was lying face down outside the door. The crime did not appear to be a robbery, as the house was undisturbed and there were no signs of forced entry. This led the police to wonder who might have wanted to kill Alicia and why. However, police attention was diverted when they learned that the house belonged to Alicia's sister, Amanda. They began to consider the possibility of mistaken identity, suspecting that Amanda might have been the intended target. But Amanda was in New York at the time of the shooting. The nanny, who was in the house when the shooting occurred, was questioned by police. They asked her if she had seen the shooter or knew anyone who might have wanted to harm Alicia. The nanny reported that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots. When she ran downstairs, she found Alicia lying face down and unconscious on the floor. Unfortunately, the nanny did not see the shooter. Alicia's acquaintances told the police that Alicia seemed to get along well with her husband, Bradley. However, she gave the police a crucial clue when she mentioned that Alicia's sister, Amanda, was having problems with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. After reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the police discovered that they had been called to Amanda and Kevin's address several times before, all in connection with domestic disputes. The police found this information particularly interesting and decided to investigate further. Before dawn, they visited Kevin at his home in another part of Everett. When they knocked on the door, Kevin opened it, looking as if he had just woken up. During the conversation, the officers asked Kevin if he knew where Amanda was, and he replied that she should be home. The police questioned Kevin about his whereabouts the night before. He claimed to have gone home, saying that his sister and mother would confirm his alibi. He did not ask why the police were there. When they told him that there had been a shooting in the house where his children lived, he showed no emotion, which was unusual for a father. He should have asked if his children were okay, but he did not. When the police told him that Amanda was away on business, Kevin appeared genuinely surprised, exclaiming, "Really?" and ending the conversation. As they left, the police discovered surveillance cameras at 2 nearby homes that could help corroborate Kevin's story. After reviewing the footage, the police discovered a car parked near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. The footage showed someone resembling Kevin walking out the front door, getting into the car, and driving away, contradicting Kevin's claim that he had been home all night. The recording was not clear enough to confirm the identity of the person as Kevin. To gather more information, the police reviewed footage from another camera, which gave them a closer look at the car but did not help identify it. All they could see was that it was a light-colored car. They fast-forwarded the footage and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. However, they now noticed a crucial detail. The right front tire of this car was different from the other 3. The 3 tires were light-colored, while the right front tire was dark. The car stopped near Kevin's house, and the same person seen in the first footage got out of the car and walked back to the house. Whoever this man was, He had entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 call about a shooting started coming in. The car then drove away and never returned. It was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's, meaning the car had enough time to get to Amanda's house, or it may not have been involved in the shooting. Amanda first learned of her younger sister Alicia's death when her father called her, just hours after the tragedy. Amanda was in New York at the time, away from her family. Alicia's death was especially devastating, as she had recently married and was looking forward to starting a family of her own. When police questioned Amanda about potential suspects, she immediately pointed to her ex-husband Kevin as the likely culprit. During their 8 years together, Amanda endured physical abuse, leaving her bruised. Even after their divorce in June 2017, Kevin's behavior did not change. He continued to threaten Amanda, causing her to fear for her safety. Following a court ruling in August 2017, Amanda was awarded full custody of their 3 young children. The court ordered Kevin to pay $800 a month. This marked a new beginning for Amanda as she rebuilt her life in Everett, Washington. Surrounded by the love and support of her family, Amanda overcame the challenges of being a single mother. Kevin threatened Amanda, saying he would kill her. As a former soldier, he had been trained. Amanda believed she was the target of the attack, but her younger sister died. She even obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated the order several times. Kevin frequently loitered outside her home, peering through windows and instilling fear in Amanda and her 3 children. Although he ignored the restraining order, he was never charged by the police. In one particularly disturbing incident just weeks before her sister was murdered, Amanda was brutally beaten as she got out of her car. She was returning home late at night and had parked in the driveway next to her house. She didn't see the attacker's face because the attack happened so suddenly, but she was certain Kevin was the culprit. Kevin Lewis, 30, was initially the prime suspect in the death of Alicia Canales Maguire. Police believed he was targeting his ex-wife. However, Kevin did not know Amanda was in New York, nor did he know Alicia was babysitting Amanda's children while she was away. Police found discrepancies. If the person in the video was indeed Kevin, he would have been home during the entire time of the shooting. Furthermore, his sister and mother had provided Kevin with a solid alibi. Therefore, the police continued to investigate and look into what happened. Upon returning to Amanda's home, the police re-examined the crime scene. Ballistics experts determined that Alicia was shot with the door partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, then fired inside. Evidence at the crime scene showed that the shooter fired multiple shots while standing next to the garage, then moved toward the door and fired again from inside. Alicia's autopsy revealed that she died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with a total of 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the shots caused gunpowder wounds, suggesting they were fired at close range. Although the medical examiner was unable to determine the exact order of the shots, it is believed that the 2 head wounds may have been the final shots. Forensic analysis confirmed that all 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same type of gun. The wounds to Alicia's head were consistent with shots fired at close range. The shell casings found at the crime scene also caught the attention of police because the type of shell casing was uncommon. It was a Russian-made shell casing under the brand name Talamo. Since this was not a common brand, police hoped to identify the seller or buyer of the bullets. After investigating, they discovered that a Walmart store near the crime scene had sold the bullets. A Walmart representative informed police that a man had purchased the bullets and that they had surveillance footage of the transaction. After reviewing the footage, which was recorded on September 18th, 2 days before Alicia died, police thought the buyer might be Kevin. However, they were wrong, as the man in the footage was not Kevin. The buyer paid with a credit card, allowing police to obtain his name. After investigating this new lead, police found no connection between the man and Kevin, Alicia, Amanda, or the nanny. Therefore, police needed to find new evidence to move the case forward. Amanda says that at first their relationship was good, but eventually he became violent and started hitting her. The relationship ended in a messy divorce, with a restraining order and full custody of the children awarded to Amanda. Amanda was devastated to learn that it was Alicia who died in the shooting. Believing it was a case of mistaken identity, she believed the bullets were meant for her and told the police that Kevin was the attacker. However, according to surveillance cameras, Kevin was home at the time of the shooting. During the investigation, the police reviewed the footage taken the night of Alicia's death again. Now they noticed something they had not noticed before. This low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving the house, walking to the car, and getting into the back seat behind the driver. But why wasn't he in the front passenger seat? In search of an answer, the police concluded that someone else was in the front passenger seat. So, when the car pulled up in front of Kevin's house, there were probably two people in the car. Police had no evidence that Kevin was involved in Alicia's death, but they collected evidence of Kevin's attacks on his ex-wife Amanda and arrested him in November 2018. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and Alicia's case remained unsolved after more than a year. A breakthrough in her case came in 2019 when a woman contacted the police station with crucial information. The woman reported that she had attended a party near Spokane, where she met a girl who claimed to be involved in a murder. This girl, Angelica, bragged about being hired to commit a crime on York Road, the same location where Alicia was shot and killed. Even though Spokane is a 5-hour drive from Everett, police decided to follow up on the lead. According to the woman, Angelica mentioned that she and her boyfriend were involved in the case, saying that the victim died from a gunshot wound to the head, fired from a corner. They were hired by the children's father. Furthermore, Angelica said that they had taken the life of the wrong person. It was a case of mistaken identity. The police have never released details about this case. Only the police and family members knew that Alicia was shot in the head. Considering that Angelica knew many details about the crime, the police were interested in this information. During the search for Angelica, the police discovered that her real name was Alexis Hale. On her social media profile, they found photos of her holding a 9mm pistol, which could be the murder weapon. In addition, some videos show a man in the background, identified as her boyfriend, Uden Feltz. A video posted by Alexis on the night of Alicia's death shows her filming through the windshield of a car, analyzing traffic signs. Police were able to pinpoint the exact location of the car, about a 10-minute drive from Kevin's house. A few days after Alicia's death, police discovered a video of Uden bragging about a large sum of money. Further investigation led them to a social media post by Uden, where they found 5 comments, one of which was from his aunt. When they looked at her profile, they realized she was also Kevin's mother. Turned out Uden was Kevin's cousin. Police now had enough evidence to make an arrest. The first person to be handcuffed was Alexis Hale. She screamed and said the police couldn't arrest her because she was only 17. She knew why she was being arrested and asked for a lawyer. Around the same time, police arrested Uden in another part of town. To build their case, police analyzed phone records from both Uden and Alexis, revealing a trip from Spokane to Everett that coincided with the shooting. Alexis did not tell police anything. Kevin is in prison, serving a 3-year sentence for assaulting Amanda. Therefore, police hope to get some information from Uden. Police obtained a confession and the name of the person who hired Alexis and Uden. It was Kevin Lewis. To gather more information, the police took Uden to the crime scene and asked him to describe what happened. Uden began explaining how Kevin brought him there and showed him where the house was, and then Uden took Kevin home. Uden was then asked by the police to describe what happened when his girlfriend Alexis knocked on the door. Uden explained that the door was ajar and Alicia stuck her head out and saw Alexis walking out the door. As Alexis was walking away, Uden rounded the corner and started shooting. Alicia closed the door, but Uden opened it again and continued shooting. He fired 2 more shots before Alicia was able to close the door. Uden then said that he ran from the crime scene. Kevin Lewis was arrested on charges of aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder in connection with the death of Alicia Canales Maguire in 2017, while he was serving time for assaulting his ex-wife Amanda. The 2 people involved in the case are Uden Feltz and Alexis Hale. Uden, then 20, pleaded guilty to first-degree intentional homicide in July 2020 and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. Alexis, then 18, also pleaded guilty and received a 15-year sentence. During his trial, Jaden said that he committed the crime for money and street cred. Jaden used the money Kevin paid him to get tattoos and buy a pair of Timberland boots and a Ferragamo belt. He claimed Alexis took the handgun from a family member and he split $200 with her. Kevin pleaded not guilty and went to trial later that year. The prosecution claimed that Kevin paid Jaden and Alexis $2,400 to harm his ex-wife Amanda, but that there was mistaken identity and Alicia's tragic death resulted. Jaden and Alexis claimed that Kevin gave them the address, and Jaden claimed that he did not know who the target was, only the address. Jaden received the payment after dropping Kevin off at his home. Jaden and his girlfriend Alexis then returned to the location Kevin had indicated. They got out of the car and approached the house, with Jaden stopping near the garage and Alexis knocking on the front door. When Alicia answered, Alexis left and Jaden continued to fire until he ran out of ammunition. Jaden initially fired from his position near the garage and then went up to the front porch to fire the remaining shots. He pointed the gun at the house, aiming at Alicia's neck and head area. They then drove away but quickly returned, concerned that they might have left a glove at the scene. However, when they saw a police car, they turned around and left the area, using GPS directions to drive back to Spokane. The defense argued that Kevin never actually used the word kill when speaking to Jaden and said that Kevin only said to get the target off the road. However, the prosecution countered that Kevin had a history of violence and had threatened Amanda. In November 2021, Kevin Lewis was convicted of first-degree murder after a 6-week trial, with the jury reaching a verdict in less than 3.5 hours. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole in January 2022. As part of his sentence, Kevin was also banned from contacting his ex-wife and children for the rest of his life. He is currently serving his sentence at the Washington State Prison in Walla County. William Smolinsky Jr., nicknamed Billy, went missing at the age of 31 under suspicious circumstances that have tortured his loved ones. Billy was described as a blue-collar hard worker with a love for rebuilding old cars. He was holding down several jobs when he disappeared, including working as a tow truck driver and a technician for a heating and air conditioning company. He also mowed lawns and drove buses and dump trucks for extra income. He was described as a homebody who rarely traveled. However, on August 21, 2004, Billy and his girlfriend, Madeline, traveled to West Palm Beach, Florida, where her son, Thomas Carpuck Jr., a former Marine, lived and worked. His girlfriend, Madeline, was 16 years older than Billy. Sometime during the weekend, Billy allegedly found Madeline talking to another man on the phone in the bathroom. Later on the beach, he tried to take her phone, and she screamed for the police. It turns out the other man was a married town councilman by the name of Chris Sorensen, who lived in Woodbridge, Connecticut. Sorensen was also the owner of the school bus company that Madeline worked for and Billy had previously worked for. After the incident, the couple returned to Connecticut late at night on August 22nd. On Monday, Billy met with his sister Paula and stated that he was through with Madeline. However, in the early morning hours of August 24th, Billy put a ladder to Madeline's apartment and climbed to her second-floor window. She then let him in the front door and they argued because she stated he wanted to get back together, but she didn't, and then he left. Apparently, he was seething for most of the day and even placed 3 calls to Chris, the man she was having an affair with. On the first 2 calls, he hung up without leaving a message. On the third call, he left a message stating, "You better watch your back." These were the last calls made from Billy on his phone. A few hours after the last phone call, Billy would go missing. He was last seen by his neighbor at his home at 130 Holly Street in Waterbury, Connecticut, on August 24, 2004. Billy's neighbor, Roy, claimed that Billy came to his house on August 24th between 3:30 and 3:45 p.m. and told him about the breakup with Madeline and said that he was going up north for a few days to look at a car and allegedly asked him to care for his German Shepherd, Harley, while he was gone. Roy stated that the next day he went to let Harley out and feed him, but the house key was not where Billy said it would be. Roy then called Billy's ex-girlfriend, Mary Ellen, who said she knew something was wrong immediately. Billy and Mary Ellen had adopted Harley together as a puppy from a breeder during their 8-year relationship. And any time that Billy needed him looked after, Mary Ellen was always the one to do so because they still shared time with him and remained close friends. They had an understanding that if one was unavailable to take care of him, the other would do so, and it had apparently worked out that way for a long period of time. Strangely, she said he would have never left Harley unattended or in the care of a neighbor, leading many people to disbelieve Roy's story. Also, Billy did not notify any of his family or friends, whom he stayed in constant contact with, about his sudden trip up north. He also did not notify his boss, who claimed that Billy had never not shown up for work before, especially without notifying him. Mary Ellen then called Billy's sister Paula, and the word spread quickly through the Smolinsky family that something strange was going on with Billy. When Billy's sister arrived at his house, she thought it was odd where his truck was parked. She noted that it was parked at the bottom of the driveway, and he had never parked it there before. As family and friends convened at Billy's house, his truck was blocking the driveway. So Paula said she got in and moved it up against the house where Billy usually parked it. She said, "I didn't think much about it at the time, but now I do." When his family attempted to report him missing, Billy's family was turned away and told to wait 3 days to see if he returned home because Billy had told his neighbor Roy that he was going out of town. Several days after he disappeared, his truck was broken into one night and papers were left in disarray. Upon an investigation, police found his wallet and keys tucked inside the front seat of the truck. Even though suspicions surrounded his neighbor, Roy, in February 2018, he passed away in a car accident and was never named a person of interest. A break in the case appeared to come in 2006 when a confidential informant told cops that back in February 2004, he was sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts with another man when the two of them spotted the missing posters the Smolinskys had tacked up throughout the valley. The informant said that the other man told him Sean Karpiuk, Madeline's son, killed Billy because Billy supposedly beat her up. The informant stated that Sean had supposedly choked Billy and killed him while in Madeline's apartment. Sean supposedly then called his friend Jason, and together they buried him at a job site that Sean was working at. He stated that they dug a hole and buried him under a spot where concrete was poured over the very next day. Sean had worked as a gravedigger and also at a landscaping company, but the cops never got a chance to question him because 5 months after Billy disappeared, he died of a heroin overdose. Several years after Sean died, his best friend, Chad Hansen, came forward multiple times and claimed that he had helped Sean bury Billy's remains, which were wrapped in carpet, and they covered it with lime. As a result of those multiple confessions, law enforcement began digging up locations in Seymour, Connecticut in February 2008, in Naugatuck State Forest in February 2010, and Oxford, Connecticut in 2011 looking for Billy's body. The Oxford search alone lasted 10 days and cost more than $100,000, but Billy was never found. Chad would later admit to purposely misleading police. In February 2011, he was charged with interfering with police and making a false statement. In January 2013, he pleaded guilty to one charge of making a false statement concerning injury or death and was sentenced to 4.5 years, but ended up only serving 2. Chad was also a known criminal and had 12 prior criminal convictions. Suspiciously, Madeline was seen ripping down Billy's missing flyers and was even videotaped doing so. This occurred on several occasions, sometimes with her friend Frances and sometimes with one of her sons. Madeline and her friend Frances would eventually follow Billy's mom as she hung up the missing posters and would immediately rip them down in front of her. For several months, the posters were removed every night, and Billy's family would repost them daily. Madeline also refused to take a polygraph test and was named a suspect at some point in the investigation, but was later ruled out. She also sued Billy's family, accusing them of harassment for posting missing person flyers and falsely accusing her of being involved in his disappearance. During one encounter while driving a Woodbridge school bus, Madeline followed Jan Smolinsky around town. Billy's mother, Jan, was sadly arrested for harassment for putting up Billy's missing posters by a school where Madeline worked as a bus driver. A judge decided in Madeline's favor and awarded her $52,666 in damages. However, the verdict is under appeal. Sadly, of Madeline's 5 children, 3 have died. Her only daughter, Crystal died from suicide. Sean died from a heroin overdose in February 2005, and Tom, in February 2008, drowned in calm waters off eastern Long Island despite being a former Marine and an excellent swimmer. Another son was in prison at the time Billy disappeared. Madeline stated that Chad Hansen invented the story about Sean killing and burying Billy. She also stated, "I don't think he is lying. I know he is lying." She believes that Billy is a survivor who could be living in the woods somewhere and says that his family has ruined her life. Both Chad Hansen and Sean Karpiuk are considered persons of interest in Billy's disappearance. Witnesses told police Chad has bragged about killing Billy with Sean and has said that his body would never be found. Chad, a habitual drug user, was usually under the influence of heroin or crack cocaine at the time he allegedly made these statements. Billy's mother believes Chad may in fact be telling the truth about her son's alleged murder and about helping dispose of the body, but is only lying about its location. Billy had no history of drug use and no police record, and he only drank socially at the time he vanished. He deposited most of his last paycheck in the bank prior to his disappearance, and his bank accounts have never been accessed since then. Also, Billy's social security number has not been used since he went missing. Billy's truck was never fingerprinted even though his family requested it. When Jan contacted the television show America's Most Wanted about broadcasting news about Billy's disappearance, the show's producers contacted the Waterbury Police Department about the case and were told that investigators didn't suspect any foul play. Unable to run a segment without cooperation from local police and with no suspected foul play, Billy's story never made the national broadcast. 18 months after he disappeared, the police chief announced in an interview that foul play was a possibility. Thanks to the persistence of Billy's parents, in February 2009, federal legislation known as Billy's Law was introduced in Congress to help streamline the missing persons databases available to law enforcement. Billy's Law, also known as the Help Find the Missing Act, is intended to help ensure that other families won't experience the delays and frustration that the Smolinskys have gone through in the search for their missing son. So far, it is only implemented in 4 states: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Tennessee, but it is being campaigned to become implemented in all 50 states. Billy has never been found, and as of today, his case remains unsolved. Sylvia Baker was a 28-year-old single mother of 2 children in 1982. She worked at a food and beverage company and the Hartford Public Library and took courses in sociology and design at Greater Hartford Community College, now known as Capital Community College. On July 17, 1982, Sylvia's 8-year-old son, Kelsey, was watching TV and her 2-year-old daughter, Alina, was sleeping. The 3 lived in an apartment on Sisson Avenue, a few blocks away from the Mark Twain House in Hartford, Connecticut. That Saturday afternoon, Sylvia told Kelsey she would be right back and went outside to take the garbage out. A little bit later, Kelsey went to the window and saw his mom outside talking with some neighbors. He didn't think much about it and returned to watching TV and eventually fell asleep. It would be the last time she would be seen alive. Witnesses reported that a blue van pulled up to the curb with several men and women inside. It appeared that Sylvia seemed to know them and approached the van and stepped in. The van then drove away. It is believed that Sylvia most likely got in the van willingly just to talk to the occupants and not to leave because she would not have left her children alone for any period of time. That would have been completely out of character for her. The night after Sylvia disappeared, kids playing near a pond at Kinney Park found Sylvia's body 2 miles from her apartment. She was naked and near a man who lived nearby. The man said he heard about the body from neighborhood kids and went down to check it out himself before the police arrived. People began to question if one of her ex-boyfriends could be involved. Sylvia's mother, Ethel Logan, stated that her daughter had recently joined a strange new religion and said it was some kind of cult thing. She said that whatever happened with the group, Sylvia objected and tried to get out, but they wouldn't let her. The so-called cult Sylvia's mother referred to is Rastafarianism. However, investigators found this angle a dead end. Some of Sylvia's ex-boyfriends were interviewed, but her murder did not appear to be a crime of passion. The man who dropped his wallet was never mentioned in the press, and the police never followed up with him and apparently believed his story. In the late 1980s and 1990s, investigators and the press noticed a pattern of women, particularly those who lived and spent time frequenting bars and clubs in Hartford's North End, disappearing late at night with their bodies being found in parks or other remote areas in and around Hartford. In the 1990s, a task force was formed to investigate these murders and others in other Connecticut towns as possibly related to a serial killer. At one time, there were as many as 17 murders that authorities thought could possibly be related, but several of those murders have since been found to be unconnected, while others may be related and not included. 6 years after Sylvia was killed, a 22-year-old Hartford resident, Patricia Thompson, was also found murdered, and Tamika Mayo of Hartford was last seen in the North End before her body was found in a secluded area of Rocky Hill. In 1991, 28-year-old Carla Terry, who lived near Kinney Park, was found dead at the Mark Twain Drive extension in Hartford. All three were assaulted, strangled to death, and then had their bodies moved. In 1987, 29-year-old Mary Shirley, who also spent time in Hartford's North End, was found dead behind a stone wall off Old Route, and though her body had deteriorated too much for a cause of death to be determined, her murder hasn't been ruled out as being connected. While the 1990 murder of 19-year-old Deidre Dancy has often been thought to be linked to these other murders, the MO of her killing was different. Alina and Kelsey moved in with their grandmother, and it was only as Alina grew up that the enormity of what had happened to her family became clear. Sadly, Alina has no memories of her mother. Several years ago, when Detective Andrew Jacobson began working on the cold case, he agreed with the original investigators that the Rastafarian angle didn't make sense and the ex-boyfriends were not the most likely culprits. But Jacobson believes that the man who owned the wallet is a person with information and that he wasn't forthcoming back in the 80s. The spot where the wallet was found is near the last area a vehicle could have traveled. From that point on, Sylvia's body would likely have had to be carried. Detective Jacobson stated, to get her body naked and bound to the edge of Kinney Park, it would be very difficult for one person to do it in the middle of the night by themselves, so there's at least 2 people involved, if not more. She also did not have scratches or abrasions, which means she most likely wasn't dragged. As Jacobson examined the man with the wallet further, he learned that a relative who lived with him was being looked at by other investigators, and that he is suspected in a series of sexual assaults. Both are part of a group of men Jacobson believes may be connected to Sylvia's death and other crimes. Another relative who lived with the man with the wallet also had a man that fit the description of the one Sylvia got into the last time she was seen alive. Jacobson is not ready to name the man with the wallet or any of the other men he suspects may know something about Sylvia's murder and other crimes. Although he finds this person to be a person of interest and very suspicious, he acknowledges he could be wrong. He continues to work on the case, but as of today, it remains unsolved. Dorene Jane Vincent was born in 1975. When she was 12 years old, her father, stepmother, and the stepmother's 2 children moved from Bridgeport to 1316 Whirlwind Hill Road in Wallingford, Connecticut. Dorene was very unhappy with living in the rural area of Wallingford and missed her friends back in Bridgeport. She had been unhappy in the past and had once hitchhiked from her home in Bridgeport to her mother's home in Waterbury. But her father, Mark Vincent, came and took her back. On June 5, 1988, 10 days after the initial move to Wallingford, Dorene would go missing. Mark said he last saw her in the kitchen at 8 p.m. before he went into his workshop. He said they had an argument and he had become very angry and hit her and pushed her into a window on the 2nd floor, breaking it. He said she then took some money and extra clothing and left through the front door between 8 and 9 p.m. Mark said that at 9 p.m., he went to Dorene's bedroom and she was gone. Her stepmother, Sharon, was attending church at the time Dorene went missing and wouldn't arrive back home until 11:30. That's when Mark told her Dorene was missing, and then he left the home for 4 to 6 hours. He returned home without Dorene and did not report her missing. Dorene's mother, Donna, was scheduled to pick up Dorene on the upcoming Saturday, 3 days after she disappeared. She left early to go to the home where Dorene was staying because no one was answering the phone. The reason no one had answered Donna's calls was because Mark had removed the phone from the wall. When she arrived, her ex-husband, Mark, was working on a lawnmower. This is when she was told that Dorene was missing. In fact, Mark actually accused Donna of taking her. She was shocked to find out that not only was Dorene missing, but Mark was not searching for her and was not frantic at all. Mark did not want her mother reporting her missing, but she did it anyways. Donna reported that the police would not take her report and only took Mark's because they did not want conflicting reports, one being a runaway and one missing. Authorities initially believed Dorene had run away from home because of the time she had run away and hitchhiked to her mother's home. Mark was known for his violent temper, and his account of the day Dorene went missing was very inconsistent. However, he did admit to pushing her into a window and breaking it. Sharon said she didn't believe her husband's story about her disappearance because their front door had a deadbolt and had to be opened from the inside with a key, and Sharon had the only key with her. So Dorene wouldn't have been able to leave through the front door like Mark said. Mark met with police for only one interview, refused to take a polygraph test, and never asked how the case was developing. A week after she went missing, Mark visited his mother and did not tell her that Dorene was missing. He said it was because his mother wasn't a part of the child's life. Sharon and Mark separated later that summer, and Mark moved out of the Wallingford home without leaving a forwarding address with the police, and the police were unable to locate him for some time. Between the late summer and early fall of 1988, about 2 months after Dorene went missing, a state park officer encountered a man at night in the woods of the state park he patrolled in Bethel and Reading. Huntington Park is a wooded expanse of more than 800 acres that runs through 2 Fairfield County towns, Bethel and Reading. He reported seeing a man removing something from the back of a pickup truck in the woods. The officer would say he saw the man carrying something that looked like a large object similar to a rolled-up carpet or maybe even a person. When the man noticed the officer, he took off into the woods. Instead of calling the incident into the state police, he called it into his office and would also take down a description of the truck that was left behind. He gave a detailed description, including dent marks and a jury-rigged toolbox attached to the back of the pickup bed. When Wallingford police received a warrant to search Mark Vincent's pickup truck, they brought along the officer who witnessed the man in the truck. The officer would say that Vincent's truck did match the truck he saw that night, including Vincent's homemade toolbox. However, the officer could not identify the man in the woods as Mark. About a year after Dorene's disappearance, law enforcement searched Mark's mother's home in Bethel, Connecticut, where he had once lived, looking for evidence in Dorene's case. Suspiciously, they would find some items that Mark claimed Dorene had taken with her when she left. They also found a gun legally registered to Sharon and charged Mark with being a felon in possession of a firearm and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Police have searched Huntington Park several times through the years since Dorene disappeared but came up with nothing. In the summer of 1999, a psychic named Colette and a medium named Steve walked through the park woods with family and police in an attempt to pick up a new lead on where Dorene might be buried. But, again, they had no luck. Dorene's father remarried and maintains his innocence. Her mother Donna still hopes that her daughter is alive, but knows that it is most likely impossible. And as of today, this case remains unsolved. Leah Ulbrich wrote poetry growing up and even had a piece of origami she made in her 5th grade class displayed at the Museum of Natural History because it was so well done. She had an above-average IQ and was known for creating beautiful stained glass artwork. She was a teenager in the 1980s when she began experimenting with drugs. At one point, she was severely attacked, which put her in a coma and caused a traumatic brain injury. Little is known about the attack itself, but she would recover and go through rehab at the Gaylord Hospital in Wallingford, Connecticut. It is unknown if she had any lasting cognitive effects from the injury. However, after rehab, Leah moved on with her life and would eventually marry a man named Bob, and the couple would have 2 children together in the early 90s. Sadly, her children were taken from her in 1993 when they were found living in squalor and with drug paraphernalia scattered around the home. She would spend the next 2 years in trouble with the law before being jailed for 9 months in 1994. The next year, Leah would complete a drug rehab program at Elm Crest Hospital, which now sits abandoned in Portland, Connecticut. After rehab, she moved into a halfway house in Massachusetts. At this point, she was still in contact with her family until she left the halfway house in October of 1995. Weeks would go by with no contact from Leah until one day when her parents were notified by a Hartford police officer that she had been killed. Investigators believe that Leah had previously been a prostitute and was killed in an area where many prostitutes walked the streets. She was 24 years old on October 29, 1995, when around 5 a.m. witnesses saw Leah in some sort of altercation with a person in a four-door Nissan Altima or Maxima. She either tried to escape or was pushed out of the car as it sped off, but her right arm got trapped in the seat belt. She was dragged to death beside the speeding car along a 4.5-mile route beginning in Hartford, Connecticut and ending in Wethersfield before her body finally came to a rest. A newspaper delivery driver witnessed the incident and attempted to follow the car, but it sped away at more than 60 miles per hour. A woman standing on a corner witnessed the vehicle speeding by a moment later with Leah still being dragged and screaming on the side of the car. The woman called police from a payphone and reported the incident. Officers looking for Leah found a trail of blood and pieces of her clothing that ran for miles to the storm drain where her body was discovered. Leah could only be identified at first by tattoos, including the name Ozzy and a pair of theater masks on her shoulder. Hartford detectives have meticulously pored over the evidence from the scene and kept enough of it that investigators were able to send some to labs for more DNA testing. A cord for an electronic device found with Leah's remains could contain traces of the suspect's DNA but has not been publicized. In February 2002, investigators tried to entice the woman who reported the incident from a payphone to come forward by offering a $50,000 reward for information in the case. This picture was taken of Leah with her children in mid-October 1995, and it was the last time her family saw her alive. Leah's father, Robert Baskin, has used his personal tragedy in speeches throughout Washington, D.C. and Connecticut to convey the message of the nonviolence advocacy group he once led and connect with teenagers from violent communities. Leah's children are now successful adults and say that all of the heartache has made them stronger, better people. Her family still seeks answers on what really happened that day, but as of today, the details remain a mystery and the case remains unsolved. Rosa Marie Kamacho was born June 7, 1993, and went by the name Rosita. She and her mother, Rosa Delgado, lived in Hartford, Connecticut. Rosa got pregnant with Rosita at the age of 16 by married local police officer named Julio Camacho that was 32 years old at the time. Julio was working and patrolling the area when he met her hanging out on the front porch with some friends and her sisters. The age of consent at the time in Connecticut was 16, but today the law has changed and is now 18 years old if the older person is in a position of authority. When Julio got Rosa pregnant, he was married and his wife was also a police officer with the Hartford Police Department. Julio started working for the Hartford Police Department in 1988 and would be fired a year later. He was charged with third-degree assault of his ex-wife in 1989, but was rehired after the charge was dismissed. When Rosita was born in 1993, Rosa applied for state benefits. As a result, the state of Connecticut sought child support from Julio, and he was ordered to pay $750 a month. He was already paying child support for 3 other children by other relationships while also raising his second wife's children. On October 24, 1997, Rosa and her 4-year-old daughter Rosita left their residence at approximately 5 p.m. to walk to a local store together and buy groceries, including milk and diapers. She left her 5-month-old daughter at her home in the care of a sister when she left to go to the store. The store was in the 60 block of Madison Avenue, and to get there, they would have to walk past Julio's mother's home. A witness would say they saw Julio speaking to Rosa and their daughter on a street corner outside his mother's home. After going to the store, Rosa and Rosita never returned home and were reported missing the next day. It would be a month before the disappearance was announced to the media. Law enforcement stated that this was due to a language barrier between them and the family of the missing 4-year-old and her mother. Although one of Rosa's sisters spoke fluent English and a translator was available with the police department, records indicate that law enforcement did not question Julio for weeks after they disappeared. He admitted he saw them that day, but then hired a lawyer when he became a suspect. In November 1997, a month after they went missing, Julio asked the court to cancel his child support order for Rosita until DNA testing established paternity. However, he never mentioned that Rosita and her mother were missing. Rosa and Rosita lived with relatives who stated Julio visited them at their apartment and also called them regularly prior to their disappearances. But the visits stopped as soon as the pair vanished, and he never contacted her family to see if they had heard from them. Witnesses also reported seeing many deep scratches on Julio immediately after they went missing. The next month in November, a woman's body was discovered by duck hunters floating in 3 feet of water in Columbia Lake in western New Jersey, right off Interstate 80 in a remote area 3 hours from Hartford. Authorities were initially unable to identify the victim, so they named her the Lady of the Lake. The woman's identity remained a mystery until DNA tests were conducted in May of 1999. A year and a half later, the test proved that the remains were those of Rosa's. There were no signs of Rosita in the area where Rosa was found, and part of the lake was even drained to look for her. There have been no arrests in either Rosita's disappearance or Rosa's homicide, but Julio has been named as the prime suspect. Rosa's family accused the Hartford Police Department of mishandling the investigation and trying to cover up Julio's misconduct while he was with the department. Julio was seeing 2 women, including Rosa, regularly while he was on duty and fathered children with both of them. 2 women claimed that he had sexually assaulted them while on duty and in uniform. One of the incidents occurred in 1995 and the other in 1997. 5 others would eventually come forward with similar allegations. Julia was one of 7 Hartford police officers accused of committing sex crimes while on duty during this period. In 1998, Julio resigned from the Hartford Police Department, citing family issues as the reason. In the year February, Julio was arrested on corruption charges. In February 2001, Julio admitted to the 1995 and 1997 assaults and pleaded guilty to one of the charges, and the prosecution agreed to not seek charges in the other cases. It's reported that Julio had asked his brother to submit a false alibi for him after Rosa and Rosita disappeared. When authorities checked his car, they discovered the trunk liner was missing and the trunk bottom had been sanded down. They also discovered a handmade hatchet, a wire garrote, and 2 sawed-off shotguns inside Julio's residence during a search. There was no evidence of blood and the items were all very clean. During the investigation, there were several books on murder found in his home, including one on how to commit murder and get away with it. Nearly 20 years later, detectives dug up the yard of Julio and his wife's former home, and if anything was found, the information has not been publicized. He has since been released from prison and now lives in Virginia. If Rosita is still alive today, she would be 27 years old. Due to the lack of evidence at this time, Julio has never been arrested for Rosita's disappearance or her mother's murder, and as of today, their cases remain unsolved. The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by February 2014. They got married in February 2003, after dating for about 5 years. In February 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, She found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, for months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her. Then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davidson, Kathy asked Davidson police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his co-worker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed, and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A co-worker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a coworker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the coworker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the coworker refused to talk to him further. The coworker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging and that the coworker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the coworker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The co-worker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway, but Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women Jason had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was, and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night, and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident. Because there were no injection marks on Christina's body and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In February 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In February 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina as cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gina's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, prosecutor. You are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment, and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation, and those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse instead. He insisted that he was innocent. The judge said, "The jury did not believe your lies," ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, Prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layton went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole. Virginia Uden was 32 years old when she and her 2 sons, 10-year-old Reagan and 11-year-old Richard, were last seen in Wyoming. Virginia was divorced from Gerald Uden, and he was the boys' adopted father. On September 12, 1980, they were leaving Virginia's mother's home in the vicinity of the 700 block of North Federal Court in Riverton, Wyoming at approximately 1:30 p.m. Virginia had told her mom that she was taking the boys to meet Gerald in Pavilion, Wyoming, and then he was going to take the boys bird hunting. It is of note that the boys brought along their own rifle with them. The 1973 Ford Country Squire station wagon they were in that day, which Virginia had borrowed from her mother, was found abandoned and vandalized on October 4, 1980, nearly 1 month after she and her sons had disappeared. It was found in the rugged Dickinson Park area of the Wind River Mountains on the edge of Trout Creek Canyon about 20 miles west of Lander. It appeared as if someone had tried to push the car into the canyon, but it had become lodged between trees. It was then covered with branches that were cut from nearby pine trees. The car also had rags and paper stuffed into the car's gas tank. It appeared someone tried to set it on fire before attempting to push it off the canyon, but was unsuccessful. There was a large amount of blood, which was determined to be Virginia's blood type, found in the front, middle, and rear of the car. DNA testing was not available at this time, and they were only able to test the blood type. A Lander resident said he had seen the vehicle several times in the 2 weeks before law enforcement found it, but he didn't know of the investigation and said the vehicle was not covered in branches when he first noticed it. When Virginia, Reagan, and Richard disappeared, Gerald was remarried to a woman named Alice Louise Uden. Gerald and Alice suspiciously moved to Chadwick, Missouri after the three went missing. Years later, in September 2013, with evidence pointing towards Gerald, he was arrested and charged with their murders. In October 2013, he pleaded guilty to all 3 murders and provided a detailed account as to what happened. Gerald stated that he picked up Virginia, Richard, and Reagan from 123 Williams Road near Pavilion. He said they drove a short distance before all 4 got out of the vehicle. He then shot all 3 of them with the .22 caliber rifle they were going to use for bird hunting. He admitted the murders were premeditated and said he shot them after they got out of the car at a canal near Pavilion in Fremont County, Wyoming. He said he put the bodies in large drums and dumped them in Fremont Lake, which is approximately 450 feet deep. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in exchange for his guilty pleas and sentenced to life in prison. He referred to Virginia as a predator and showed no remorse for his actions. Strangely, Alice was also charged with murder and arrested at the same time as Gerald, but for a separate incident. During the investigation of Gerald, it led investigators to also investigate Alice. She was charged with murdering her husband, Ronald Holtz, a U.S. Army veteran, in late 1974 or early 1975 when he was 25 years old. They married in September 1974, and he disappeared sometime after Christmas that year. Alice allegedly told a witness years ago about shooting her husband while he was asleep. She told the same witness that she had hidden his body in a barrel before dumping it in a mine. The police had long suspected Alice murdered Ronald, but did not have enough evidence until his body was found in an abandoned gold mine in August 2013, and then she was tried for murder in February 2014. She claimed Ronald was abusive to her, and she shot him to protect her daughter from him. She was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. In February 2018, Fremont County and state officials dug behind the former home of Gerald under an old hog pen. They stated that they had uncovered new information in the case of Virginia, Richard, and Reagan. The house was located on Williams Road about 15 miles northwest of Riverton. The dig lasted about 1 week, but they never provided what information led them to dig there. Sadly, nothing of value was found. Neighbors of Gerald and Alice say they raised 2 children, attended church regularly, and lived a good life. Some were having a hard time believing the accusations against them. When they were finally arrested, the couple were in their 70s. Although an arrest in their cases was made, sadly, as of today, the case remains open because the bodies of Virginia, Reagan, and Richard have never been located. Justin Philip Harris was born August 20, 1990. When he was a child, His mother, Stephanie Sidebottom, willingly turned him and his younger sister over to the custody of the state. He sadly went through several failed foster care placements before he was placed in the R.L. Mills home in Casper, Wyoming in February. The R.L. Mills home, which has since closed down in 2011 due to financial issues, was a center for boys with a variety of emotional and behavioral problems in the 100 block of East H Street. On Valentine's Day, February 2004, 13-year-old Justin was last seen in his room at the group home. The next morning at 7 a.m., workers at the home found his room empty after he failed to show up for breakfast. His bed was found stuffed with clothes, making it appear as if he were still under the covers. His father, Philip Harris, a truck driver who had fought for custody of him, initially said he believed his son ran away to be with him. He also initially believed that his son was either still in the Casper area or tried to go to Swink, Oklahoma. His father lived in Swink, and Justin had threatened to run away to there before because he wanted to be with his father. He had also repeatedly run away from his various foster homes in the past. However, after a few days passed, Philip said he thought Justin may not have run away from the group home, but in fact could have become the victim of a crime that the group home tried to cover up. After a few weeks passed, the Casper Police Department polygraphed several people that were close to Justin, including family members, but it led nowhere. In the days immediately following Justin's disappearance, it was reported by the director of the boys' home that Justin was developmentally disabled, functioning at the level of a 6 or 7-year-old. The director also said Justin was taking medication for depression at the time of his disappearance. The staff said he required constant supervision and could not function without his psychiatric medications. However, they stated he had been doing well at the facility and was also succeeding at school. Justin's father denied that Justin suffered from any kind of disability, stating that he was just a shy boy and a quiet student. He describes him as kind, considerate, lovable, and helpful. He also said that Justin's DNA is being tested against all John Doe bodies found across the country, but there has been no matches. There is very little information in this case, and as of today, it remains unsolved. Amy Bechal was born in 1972 in Santa Barbara, California. She would later move to Wyoming in 1996, where she would meet and marry a man named Steve Bechal. They both enjoyed the outdoors, with Steve spending time rock climbing and Amy being an avid runner, amateur photographer, and like Steve, enjoyed rock climbing. She would graduate from the University of Wyoming in 1995. While in college, she was the captain of the cross-country and track teams and hoped to try out for the 2000 Summer Olympics. After college, she continued to compete in regional and national competitions, including the 1996 Boston Marathon. She and Steve settled in an apartment in Lander, Wyoming a year into their marriage, and in 1997, they purchased their first home in the same town. Around 9:30 a.m. on July 24, 1997, Amy left her apartment to run errands for their newly purchased home. But first, she would teach a children's weightlifting class at a local fitness center. She was then seen at Camera Connection at approximately 2:30 p.m. that afternoon. Employees at the store said she seemed to be in a hurry and looked at her watch several times. She then stopped at the Gallery 331, and the owner noted that Amy once again seemed in a hurry and was repeatedly looking at her watch. This was the last confirmed sighting of her that day. Authorities believe that Amy left the business and drove to the Shoshone National Forest to check the course of an upcoming 10-kilometer run planned by her gym. There's a chance she was seen running along Loop Road because a footprint similar to her sneaker was found there. Sadly, it was destroyed before police could attempt to match it. That evening, when Steve returned home after spending the day with friends, he noticed that Amy was not home, but states that he initially wasn't too concerned. But by 10:30 p.m., when Amy was still not home, he called the police because it was not like her to not come home or call if she was going to be late. Steve and his neighbors would begin searching for Amy, and a few hours later at 1 a.m., the couple's neighbor located her white Toyota Tercel parked along Loop Road in the Wind River Mountains near Shoshone National Park, where she was known to go running. Her keys, sunglasses, and her to-do list for the day were inside the vehicle, but her wallet was missing. On July 26th, search and rescue teams using dogs, 2 private helicopters, and at least 100 volunteers searched the area. Investigators initially believed she may have fallen victim to the elements or possibly been attacked by a wild animal. It wasn't long into the investigation when investigators began to turn their focus towards Steve. When investigators searched his journals for possible clues, it was noted that Steve at some point had written about an apparent need for control in their relationship. He had also penned an undated poem that revolved around murdering a person and then hiding the remains. Suspiciously, he had a series of journals describing violence towards women and his wife. He would later claim that the journals consisted of song lyrics he had written for his band and that they were unrelated to Amy or her disappearance. In 1998, local police stated that Steve was no longer a central suspect in the case, although he had not cooperated with the police. Steve provided an alibi for the time of Amy's disappearance, which was corroborated by friends who agreed they had spent the afternoon with him rock climbing. Even with this information, his lawyer still advised him not to take a polygraph test. In late August 1997, the FBI requested satellite photos from NASA of the area on the day of Amy's disappearance, but the satellite images provided no information. In January 1998, pictures were requested from NASA from the Russian space station Mir, which was believed to have snapped a shot of the area the day Amy disappeared, but the weather had prevented any quality photos that day. A woman who was camping in the Shoshone National Park on the day Amy was last seen told authorities that she witnessed a truck similar to Steve's speeding through the park during the early evening hours. The woman stated that she saw an unidentified blonde-haired woman in the passenger seat. However, it is not known if the incident is related to Amy's case. Phone records showed that Steve made a call from his house at 4:43 p.m. around the same time the witness said she spotted his truck. The Bechals' home was around a 45-minute drive from the mountain road where Steve's truck was allegedly spotted. Acquaintances of the couple gave conflicting statements about their relationship. Some described it as idyllic, while others stated that Steve was jealous and often belittled Amy, and that her demeanor changed whenever she was around him. Steve maintains his innocence and believes that authorities focused on him due to a lack of suspects and evidence in Amy's disappearance. He was interviewed only once by authorities and refused to speak with them further after he said the questions turned accusatory. Steve remarried several years after Amy vanished and still lives in the house that they purchased days before her disappearance. In June 2003, a Timex Ironman triathlon watch was discovered by a doctor hiking near the Popo Agie River and was turned in to police. It was noted to be similar to a watch Amy had owned at the time of her disappearance. However, law enforcement was unable to determine whether or not the watch belonged to her. One theory is that a possible suspect in Amy's case is Delwayne Eden, who was presently the only inmate on Wyoming's death row. He was convicted of the 1988 rape and murder of an 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel. Investigators believe Eden may be the so-called Great Basin Killer, the serial killer whom they think was responsible for the murders of at least 9 women in Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada between 1983 and 1997. His brother and sister-in-law claim he was camping in the same area and around the same time Amy went missing. Eden allegedly attempted to kidnap a family experiencing car trouble a month after Amy went missing. Shannon Breeder, her husband Scott, and their 5-month-old baby Cody were traveling along Interstate 80 when their van broke down. Eden stopped to offer help and asked Shannon to drive his green 85 Dodge van. When they got in the car, Eden pulled a gun on the family and told Shannon to drive south into the desert. Instead of driving south, Shannon hit the gas and turned in a circle, which allowed Scott to jump out of one side of the van with the baby, and Shannon jumped out the other side. Scott grabbed Eden and hit him in the head with the butt of Eden's rifle. Eden ended up getting stabbed with his own knife during the struggle and left the scene after the family sped away. Eden only spent 99 days in jail for the crime and was given 1 to 2 years probation. After the kidnapping attempt, Eden was convicted of the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Lisa Marie Kimmel in 1988 when she was driving along from Colorado to Montana. In February 2002, DNA evidence finally determined that Eden abducted Lisa at a remote rest area and killed her. They also found Lisa's car that he had buried and used as a septic tank. He is now serving life in prison for her death, but but has refused to discuss Amy's disappearance and has never been charged in any other cases besides Kimmel's. The police don't believe Uden was involved in Amy's disappearance and believe Uden's niece, who said unlike his brother and sister-in-law that he was actually visiting her in Colorado when Amy vanished. They instead continue to believe that Steve is the only viable person of interest in the case. In early 1998, Steve appeared on the Geraldo Rivera show with Amy's sisters, Casey and Jenny, who pleaded with him to provide information regarding her disappearance. Steve denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance during the program. Her family continues to search for her, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Christy Lynn Richardson, who went by the name Chris, went missing in 2014 at the age of 61. Chris was a wealthy businesswoman and owned Richardson Trucking that she and her late husband started in 1979. The trucking company transported oil and gas and was a very lucrative business. Most of the truckers called Chris Mom, and she was known to be a hard worker. When her husband passed away in February 2013, she took over the company. The day she went missing on October 6, 2014, it was her daughter's birthday, who lived only a block away from her house. Chris returned home from bringing her daughter a birthday card and visiting with her grandchildren. Her daughter said when she saw her mom, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Chris was last seen by a neighbor getting her mail from her mailbox at her home at East 24th Street in Casper, Wyoming, and then she was seen pulling her car into the garage. The truckers were required to check in with Chris when arriving to their destinations. At 7:45 that evening, she took a routine call from one of her truck drivers. The next call that came in was around 11 p.m. that night, but it went unanswered. She was expected at work at 7:15 a.m. the next day, and when she didn't show, which was very unlike her, one of her employees tried calling her. When they didn't get an answer, they then called her daughter and son-in-law, who rushed to her home and noticed that her car was still in the garage. Her daughter said immediately she knew something was wrong with her mother. Upon searching the home, they found her purse on the kitchen counter with all of her personal documents in it, such as passport, driver's license, and birth certificate, along with several $100 in cash. Her cell phone was also located on the bed, which was strange because she always kept it with her due to her being on call at all times. It was then that her daughter called the Casper Police Department. None of her vehicles were taken from the home, but the garage door opener she normally kept in her purse was the only thing missing. Her bed sheets had traces of stains that looked like blood or urine. The results of the testing done on the stains has not been released to the public yet. Over the next several days, a large search was conducted, and at one point, a helicopter was sent to search parts of Casper Mountain. A warrant was received to search her office at 6850 West Yellowstone Highway, but it is not known if any clues to her disappearance was found. There is currently a $250,000 reward for anyone giving information leading to the conviction of the person or persons involved in her disappearance. There have been numerous theories touted in her disappearance, but as of today, the case remains unsolved. Catherine Major, a mother of two, was last seen at the upscale Four Seasons Resort in Teton Village, Wyoming on September 19, 2009. She had allegedly stolen a set of master keys from a maintenance worker who had been working in her room earlier in the week. She then used the keys to break into a spa cabinet at the resort and was caught on video stealing over $700 worth of items from a display cabinet in the spa. The staff of the hotel called the police to report the theft. Catherine admitted to the theft and agreed to pay for the items and leave, and the hotel decided not to press charges against her, but they did ask her to leave the resort property. She appeared embarrassed and went to her hotel room to start packing her belongings. When a police officer went to check on her in her room, 40 minutes later, she was gone. The glass door leading to the outside was open. The safe in the room was ajar, and all of her belongings were left behind, including her wallet, purse, toiletries, $45,000 in cash, and 2 cats. There was also pill bottles, syringes, wigs, gloves, and a rope located in the room. A book was found with the middle section cut out with a tape recorder inside. This led investigators to believe that she may have been having a bipolar episode. Catherine had left a note on the counter addressed to her mother reading, "Please take care of my cats. I have nothing." Her white Jaguar convertible was left in the Four Seasons parking garage. Dogs tracked her scent through the glass doors of her room across Granite Loop Road, north towards Obsidian Drive, down a hill towards Garnet Drive, and north towards a barn in open fields before they lost the trail. Her sister said that Catherine suffered from bipolar disorder and had attempted suicide multiple times in the past. A search was conducted, but nothing was found to indicate what happened to Catherine. Her family members and investigators now believe that Catherine is no longer alive. However, her body has never been located, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. The case of Carol Maltesi. Carol Nicole Maltesi was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy, to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In February 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, he never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally break up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20th, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos. Although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed, the skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future. Stephen DeVers Jr. was 32 years old when he was last seen by his family on July 6, 2005 in Secaucus, New Jersey. He told his parents he was going to the Jersey Shore, but instead he bought a one-way plane ticket to Ireland. He would fly from New York City to Dublin, Ireland on July 8, 2005. While this might seem strange, he had actually been to Ireland several times before and has Irish relatives that live there. He was seen at a pub in Ina, County Clare after he arrived in Ireland. On July 12th, a man found his rucksack washed up on a beach at Seafield Quilty. His cell phone, clothing, passport, and ID were still inside the bag, but there was no sign of Stephen. The man who found the bag took it home and his wife transferred the SIM card from the water-damaged phone to her own phone. A couple days later, Stephen's parents called to check on him and were surprised when a stranger answered the call. It was only then that they realized he had gone to Ireland instead of Jersey Shore like he said he was. After his disappearance, his rental car was found parked at the cliffs of Maher. This led his family to believe that he might have taken his own life at that location. Although he had no debts, no problems with substance abuse, and no history of depression, he had lost his job several months before he went missing and had become very moody and withdrawn. His mother stated Steve was a good young man. He wasn't on drugs, didn't have any debts, wouldn't hurt a bug, and he was a very sensitive, caring person. She also stated he grew up in an Irish environment, as his Roscommon grandmother was a big part of his early childhood and teenage years. Steve always said that he loved Ireland. Stephen's parents and the couple who found his bag have kept in touch over the years through Christmas cards and even met one another in Ireland 11 years later. Stephen was declared legally dead in May 2016, but his body has never been recovered. The whereabouts and details leading up to his disappearance still remain a mystery, and the case remains unsolved. Margaret McEnroe was born August 25, 1977, and her teenage mother gave her up for adoption. Her name at the time was Sherwood Haley, a combination of her mother's maiden name and her biological father's name. She was adopted and grew up as the oldest of 4 adopted children in Warrant Township, New Jersey. She enlisted in the Army following 9/11, and for 2 years she was stationed as a tank mechanic in Fort Riley, Kansas. During her time in the Army, she searched for her birth mother and found her, and they became very close. She also made contact with her biological father, but lost touch shortly after Hurricane Katrina. Margaret discharged from the Army in 2004 for medical previous relationship. On October 9, 2006, she had an argument with her husband, and police were called to their home on a report of domestic disturbance. By the time the officers arrived, Margaret had left for her parents' house, but she returned later that evening. The next morning, she spoke to her best friend on the phone and everything seemed normal. However, at approximately 1:30 that afternoon, her husband left to go run errands, and when he returned at 3 p.m., Margaret was nowhere to be seen, and their 6-month-old daughter was home alone in her crib. Her vehicle and cell phone were left behind. The cell phone had been broken the night before during the argument with her husband. Margaret may have been carrying additional clothing and identification under her birth name, Sherwood Haley, in a black duffel bag at the time of her disappearance. Her husband stated $11,000 in cash disappeared from their home at the same time she did, and she may have taken the money with her. She is known to have been carrying 1 credit card, but there has been no activity on that account. There has also been no activity on her bank account either. Her husband stated that she had left home for short periods of time in the past, which is why he did not report her missing for 2 days. Her husband apparently did not call Margaret's parents looking for her or tell them that she was missing. They found out by the police a week later. One of Margaret's Army t-shirts was found on Dockwatch Hollow Road, about a mile from her home, on Thanksgiving Day in February 2006, 6 weeks after her disappearance. It was sent to a lab for analysis, but the testing did not turn up anything useful. The shirt was not weathered, indicating it had not been exposed to the elements for very long. Her family says the couple was having marital problems around the time she disappeared, and she was considering a divorce. On June 7, 2011, her husband was named a person of interest after authorities interviewed potential witnesses and neighbors near the family's home. Many people speculate that the t-shirt was planted later to try and throw off investigators' trail, especially since it was placed in an area that had previously been searched. Investigators could never confirm the $11,000 even existed, and many people speculate that it never did. Her co-workers and family members stated she was behaving normally prior to her disappearance. Friends and family also don't believe she would have left without telling someone, nor would she leave her 3 kids behind. As of today, no arrests have been made, and this case remains unsolved. Benita Karen Sanders was born on September 17, 1984, and nicknamed Little Nita. According to her mother, who is also named Benita, her daughter was last seen strapped in her stroller on the porch of her family's home. She lived in the Virginia Court Apartments in the 900 block of Baltic Avenue in Atlantic City, New Jersey. At 6 p.m. on September 14, 1986, Vanetta stated that Little Nita was eating a popsicle and her other children were playing outside at the time. Benita claimed that she looked outside at approximately 7 p.m. and discovered Little Nita had disappeared from her stroller. Benita claimed that she searched Baltic Avenue and the surrounding streets for her daughter, but she could not locate her. She would report Nita missing around 8:30 p.m. Investigators looked at both of Nita's parents in her disappearance. Her father, Abdul Salam, was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Although he had been seeking to gain custody of his daughter, he was in prison at the time of her disappearance for robbery. He and Benita were together for 8 years, and Benita had 4 children during this time, 2 of whom were Salam's, but she and Salam never legally married. Salam has stated he never believed Benita's account of their daughter's disappearance. Benita allegedly abandoned Nita at birth in 1984 by walking out of an Atlantic City hospital and leaving her behind. However, she was not charged in that case, but she did face charges when she gave birth to a son in October 1986, 1 month after Nita was last seen. In October of 1986, Benita gave birth to a baby boy at the Atlantic City Medical Center, where she had checked in under the alias Laura Smith. She was discharged from the hospital on October 7, 1986, and left with her newborn son. She then reportedly took a cab to an Atlantic City bus terminal, where she would leave the baby lying face down in a terminal restroom before she caught a bus to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thankfully, the infant was rescued shortly thereafter. In January 1987, Benita was sentenced to 9 months in jail for endangering the welfare of a child, and her 3 other children were placed in foster homes. She was paroled after 5 months but served another 15 months when she was arrested for shoplifting baby clothes while on parole. The father of Benita's newborn son told authorities that she lied to him and said she had an abortion when she was pregnant. He did not know she had carried the baby to term and given birth until he was contacted by law enforcement. Benita had 3 more sons after the one she abandoned in 1986. The prosecutor in Benita's case told the court that she was uncooperative during the investigation into little Nita's disappearance. He stated that she provided false leads and also lied to authorities. But Nita evidently never inquired as to the status of her daughter's case. Salon believes that his daughter was not abducted and has asked investigators to search the yard behind the Virginia court apartments for human remains. Authorities utilized cadaver-sniffing dogs earlier in the case but could not locate any evidence in the area. Salam also stated that New Jersey's Division of Youth and Family Services was supposed to check on little Nita's well-being prior to her disappearance at his request. However, when they arrived at the residence, no one was home. By the time they prepared for a second attempt to see Nita, she had already vanished. Investigators believe that Nita possibly choked to death on the popsicle stick she was holding on the day of her disappearance and was buried somewhere off the family's property. However, there is no evidence to support this theory. In February 2009, authorities began searching a wooded area in Pleasantville, New Jersey for her remains. Reportedly, Benita's best friend went to police and said Benita had buried her daughter there. However, nothing was recovered at the search site. A forensic anthropologist noted that given Nita's age and the time that has passed since her disappearance, it's possible that even if her body had been there at one time, there would be no trace of it now. Benita Karen Sanders was just 3 days shy of turning 2 when she disappeared. No one has ever been arrested in her disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. 5-year-old Dulce Maria Alves went missing on September 16, 2019 from Bridgestone City Park in Bridgestone, New Jersey. Her mother, Noma Alves Perez, along with her sister had taken Dulce and her 3-year-old little brother, Manuel, to the park that day to play. On the way to the park, they stopped at a convenience store and bought ice cream for a snack. They arrived at the park shortly after 4 p.m. and the 2 children ran to go play on the swing. Noma and her sister remained in the car while Dulce and Manuel played on the playground about 30 yards away. She was checking a scratch-off lottery ticket while her 8-year-old sister was doing homework. About 20 minutes later, Manuel ran up to the car crying. His ice cream was lying on the ground, and when she asked him where Dulce was, he pointed at the spot where he last saw her. The coconut water ice she had with her was also missing. After calling her brother who lived nearby, she then called the police at 4:51 p.m. Within minutes, police arrived to the park and started gathering clues and interviewing what few immediate witnesses they could find. Investigators would start a large search for the child and conduct interviews. After interviewing witnesses at the park, police got a description of a suspect described as light-skinned, possibly Hispanic, about 5'6" -5'8", with a thin build, had acne on his chin and was wearing a black shirt, red pants, and orange sneakers, possibly Nike brand. He put Dulce in a red van with a sliding door and tinted windows and left the park with her. A day after Dulce was kidnapped, an Amber Alert was issued looking for a man in a red van. According to authorities, Nothing has ever been found and no red van has ever been located that could be connected to her disappearance. Over time, they have conducted thousands of interviews and processed thousands of hours of video frame by frame in hopes of finding any important clues in the case. At the time she went missing, she and Manuel didn't live with their mother, but lived with their grandparents instead. Noma, who was pregnant, lived in a room at a residence nearby. She was only 14 years old when Dulce was born, and she shared joint custody of her and Manuel with her parents. Dulce's father was in Mexico at the time of her disappearance and had not been a part of her life since he had moved there when she was 3. Neither her father, her mother, nor any other members of Dulce's family have been named as a suspect in her case. Noma admits that for some time her children were completely out of her sight due to a heel partially blocking her view of them while they played. She has said she regrets losing view of them on a daily basis. This is the last image of Dulce taken as they stopped at the store to get ice cream on the way to the park. Authorities believe Dulce may have been abducted by an opportunistic predator at the park. Jackie Rodriguez, who helped the family with media coverage and searches, said at times she felt the community could be withholding information due to immigration concerns. Sadly, Dulce had just started kindergarten about a week prior to her disappearance. To this day, she has never been found and the case remains unsolved. Margaret Ellen Fox was born on February 4, 1960. She enjoyed riding horses and graduated from St. Paul's School in Burlington, New Jersey in 1974 and lived with her siblings and parents at 224 Penn Street. A few weeks after completing 8th grade at 14 years old, Margaret and her 11-year-old cousin, Lynn Park, placed ads in the paper advertising babysitting services. Soon after, on June 19, 1974, a man who called himself John Marshall called Lynn and explained that he was interested. He told her he had a backyard swimming pool and a swing set at his home in Mount Holly. Lynn's parents would not allow her to go to the Marshall's home, so she gave her cousin Margaret his contact information. John said he would pay her $40 a week to babysit his 5-year-old son. Although he postponed meeting with her several times, he finally committed to a meeting date. He said that either he or his wife would be in a red Volkswagen. However, he called again and told Margaret's dad, who answered the phone that time, that he had to reschedule due to the death of his mother-in-law. Judging by the man's voice, her dad thought he was around 35 to 45 years old. Margaret's trip to Mount Holly was postponed once again until Monday, June 24th. Strangely, he never supplied his address to Margaret or her parents. On June 24th, she planned to take a bus to Mill and Main Streets in Mount Holly, which was 8 miles from her home, to have an interview with the man about the babysitting job. One of her siblings went to the bus stop with her and witnessed her getting on the bus. She left home with her purse, a bathing suit for swimming in the Marshall's pool, and her Huckleberry Hound eyeglass case. One passenger remembered sitting behind Margaret on the bus and briefly chatted with her. Witnesses reported seeing her near Mill and High Streets after she got off the bus in Mount Holly. Margaret had been told to call home as soon as she arrived at the man's home, but that call never came. She was supposed to get a ride back home from either John or his wife, but when she didn't show up at 2:30 p.m., her parents became very worried. John had given Margaret a telephone number to reach him, and the number was traced to a phone booth in front of a Route 38 supermarket in Lumberton, New Jersey. Investigators at the time did not believe a legitimate person seeking a babysitter would have given a payphone as their callback number. In the hours after Margaret was reported missing, police started recording all phone calls placed to her home. One was from a man who has never been identified, who demanded $10,000 for Margaret's safe return. He stated, $10,000 might be a lot of bread, but your daughter's life is the buttered topping. A note arrived about a day after this, and the man gave specific instructions as to how the money should be given. He said the money should be put in a box with blue wrapping. This is also the same color as her blouse she was wearing. He also said Margaret was okay and that we only tore her blouse and broke her glasses. Her parents quickly withdrew the money but received no instructions on how to deliver it, and 2 days later, on June 30th, a second letter arrived that said $10,000 was a lot of bread, but your daughter's life was the buttered topping, noting the past tense. According to the FBI, the letter indicated that the ransom exchange was off because the parents had goofed in making the arrangements. It ended with "so long again," and the S, L, and A were highlighted. SLA were the initials of the Seminese Liberation Army, a terrorist organization famous for kidnapping Patty Hearst earlier that same year. They were not known to be active in New Jersey, but were in the news around the time of her disappearance. Investigators doubted the SLA's involvement in Margaret's disappearance. Police believe either the kidnapper or a prankster mentioned SLA because the group was frequently in the news. After the second letter arrived, there was no further communication, and it was never determined if the call and the letters were legit or a hoax. FBI examiners took fingerprints from the note and compared them to local collections of prints, but to no avail. Newer generations of investigators hoped to locate the prints and put them in the national database for comparison. But at some point they went missing along with Margaret's dental records. It's possible the note was a hoax, but they haven't ruled anything out. A detective canvassed Mount Holly's downtown area, showing Margaret's photo to approximately 200 people. Fellow officers also attempted to work every angle of the case and found their first suspect, an employee at the A&P supermarket named John Marshall. Marshall was eventually cleared after his alibi checked out and he passed a polygraph exam. Some investigators remain suspicious since polygraph testing isn't always conclusive. However, others believe the true criminal wouldn't have given his real name. Margaret has never been heard from again, and John Marshall has never been identified. Several other parents in the area complained that someone had attempted to lure their daughters with fake job offers. Also, several women reported being accosted by a man in a red Volkswagen. A man driving a car matching that description had attempted to pick up a girl in Mount Holly in May. A sketch of the man was later released in August. A sex offender who had owned a red Volkswagen at the time and lived close to where Margaret was last seen was questioned and cleared 4 years later. In 1976, a man confessed to her kidnapping, but it later turned out to be a hoax because he had been confined to a hospital the day she disappeared. Her parents are now deceased, but her siblings are still alive and some still live in the Burlington area. No arrests have ever been made in her disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.